Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do real quickly is I wanted to go over your standardized testing reading so that you're prepared for our meeting on Wednesday with Mike Acomb from Solon Schools. So this is a very quick video that'll hopefully go over some of the material that was in the book because I know it's complex and kind of dry. So I'm hoping that maybe this will help you to understand it. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of survey your own thinking. Coming into this unit, what were your impressions of standardized testing and why? Most of us have had experience with standardized testing, and a lot of us have pretty strong feelings. So I'm going to take a minute to let you just kind of think about that. So standardized testing is something that probably many of us have experienced. We have strong feelings about. Maybe some of us have experience being good test takers, but probably more than likely some of us have felt like the test some way did not adequately display our full potential, and that's a pretty common experience with standardized testing. Some of the things we want to think about as standardized testing is what the different types. When we say standardized testing, there's really a lot of different types of standardized testing. The first one are achievement tests. Those are measure knowledge and skills that are learned in school, and those are the things like when you are taking the end of course exams or you're taking the state exams. Those are achievement tests. Aptitude tests are things that are going to predict a student's ability. And so probably many of you took like the SAT or the ACT. Some of you might have taken like the California Achievement Test, things like that. And those are trying to predict like a student's ability. And so those are helpful oftentimes to figure out if a student isn't achieving in a classroom, to find out if it maybe is because they have a lower ability. And then the last one is a psychological test, measures cognitive abilities. And so the aptitude and the psychological tests for us as classroom teachers, what those do is allow us to recognize the students that we maybe need to differentiate with, maybe we need to make accommodations for. And so those are important for us to know. But really, from day to day, our experiences as classroom teachers are probably widely shaped by our students' experiences with achievement tests. Now, the difference between a criterion reference test and a norm reference test are important to understand. So we're going to spend most of our time looking at criterion reference tests as teachers, but there are times when, for instance, if we're having a student screened for special education services, it might be important for us to understand exactly how these norm reference tests work, because those are the ones that they're going to be using to figure out. We know the student isn't achieving in the criterion reference test, so we need to figure out why. So norm reference tests use a bell curve. There's an expected performance, and we'll go over that a little bit more in a bit. They're used for things such as placement, especially for program eligibility and enrollment. They measure broad skills. They're sampled from a variety of textbooks, syllabi, judgments of experts. So it might ask your student to do things that maybe aren't necessarily in your curriculum. The skills are usually tested less than 4 times, and the items vary very much in difficulty so that we can discriminate high ability from low ability. And these are reported out in things like percentile ranks, grade equivalencies, stay nines, and examples of norm reference tests might be something like an SAT or an IQ test. Criterion reference tests, on the other hand, the score is based on the number of correct answers. Performance is gauged against a standard and skills that are expressed as instructional objectives. So you find out, where in a norm reference, maybe you'll find out that the verbal reasoning is below average, but in a criterion reference, you might find out whether or not it's vocabulary or comprehension that's dealing with that. Each skill is tested at least 4 times to get an adequate sample, and they're supposed to be the same level of difficulty. Each individual is compared against a standard of acceptable achievement, so they're not compared against everybody else who took the test, just this standard of achievement. Scores are generally reported as a percentage, and some examples might be like AP tests, if any of you took like AP US History, a driving test, an end of unit test, state testing. Okay, so let's look at criterion reference. So criterion reference, one of the things that we need to know is a student's performance is really measured only against the standard that's expected of them. So there isn't we're not looking at students in relationship to other students. So it's their skill against a predetermined standard or criteria. So for instance, we might decide that the score of 40 is a proficient score. And so that is something that the state sets for state exams, for instance. And so it really doesn't matter how many students pass or fail in that setting of the cut score. But once they've set the cut score, then they'll just draw a line, and the students that are below the cut score are labeled as not proficient, and those above it are labeled as proficient. So one of the things you might look at, though, is when we're looking at students taking scores, like maybe the reading scores, and maybe they take them in the fall and they take them again in the spring, we might also look at what we call student growth potential, which means we look at the projected screen. So Destiny has a score of 73 in the fall, and her assessment score in the spring is projected to be 80. Bruno has a 32 of his projected spring assessment score would be 60. What we would do then is this allows us to see, Destiny has a much smaller window to cover in order to get to the proficient score and to stay proficient and to show adequate growth. Bruno's got much larger area to cover, and so we know then who's going to need the additional instructional support. And you're going to see Mike talking a lot about that, identifying the kids who have to really make a lot of ground up. Okay. So when we get to a norm reference test, so we have that same student there, but right there, the norm reference test, we're going to compare her performance against everybody else who took the test, okay? And so this is where your score gets ranked. You are ranked in a percentile. And so that is because these norm reference tests, there's a projected bell curve. This is the expectation of everyone who takes it. So if 100 students take the test, we would have 34.13 of them scoring right in the middle at this 50% mark, and it would go up and down, okay? And so what we have here then is the probability curve. This is basis statistics. We can predict to a level of certitude that 68% of our students are going to be moving within the middle of the bell, from one standard deviation below to one standard deviation above. When we're looking at two standard deviations to standard deviations above and below, 95%. So as you can see, we kind of can figure out exactly, predict kind of where our students are going to be. And so then the individual score then is reported out as percentile ranks. And there's Z-scores and T-scores that matter to that. But I just wanted to point out to you, mathematically it's very complicated, but you as a teacher, what you get are these percentile ranks. And it isn't I used to think the percentile ranks were like the first 10%, the second 10%, the third 10%. It's not like that at all. Notice the most of your percentile ranks, your 20th percentile rank up to your almost just shy of your 90th percentile rank, are actually within that, are actually all the way up to the 95th percentile are actually within those two standard deviations. And so that's kind of important for you to understand that there's, what does it mean when somebody gets told that they are in the 95th percentile, and what does that look like? That means they're nearly or perhaps more than two standard deviations above the expected score. So that's, it's significant. Another way that you might be told as a teacher, so you're going to get told that your students are either a certain percentile rank, which lets you know exactly where in that bell curve, or if they're outside of that bell curve, your students are. Or you might get told that they're a stanine. Stanines are just another way to report out the bell curve. And so stanines just group students a little bit differently. But what we do is if you get somebody that's in the ninth stanine or the first stanine, they are way outside of those standard deviations and the expected performance. And so they are either in the top 4% or the top or the bottom 4%, right? A fifth stay nine, somebody who's in the fifth stay nine, is right in the middle of the bell curve. They're in they're the 20% of the students that are right in the middle of the bell curve. And then we have the sixth, seventh, and eighth stay nine. So if I was doing placement for like a gifted program, I might look at the eighth and ninth stay nine. If I had a student in the sixth and seventh stay nine, those might be students that I want to differentiate and make sure that we are challenging them. And then if I was looking at students that maybe are struggling because of low ability, my students in the second, third, fourth stay nine, now I start to like understand. But there's a significant difference between the fourth stay nine and the third stay nine as far as the kinds of accommodations that I'm going to be wanting to make for them, if that makes sense. Okay, so as a teacher, you'll probably get one of two sets. You're either going to get told the percentile of your student, or you might get told the stay nine. And really, what they're trying to do is same idea. They're trying to explain to you where on this bell curve. This is where every student who took the test, everybody landed on this bell curve somewhere. Where on the bell curve did your student land? It gives you a sense of them. Okay. All right. So for Wednesday, what I want you to do is to remember that your final project is due, your memo for your final project is due by Wednesday. You're going to have till midnight that day. We're going to have a virtual meeting, Google Meet, on Wednesday to discuss standardized testing. So in addition to this video, please watch the short video on data-informed instruction that I'm going to send along. It's really short. It's just a couple of minutes. And come in, be ready to dial into that meeting at noon on Wednesday. All right, so let me know if you have any questions, and we will be in touch. All right, have a good day.